The largest and most infamous concentration camp complex used by the Nazis was Auschwitz. It was a camp of immense cruelty, suffering, and killing, with an estimated at least 1.1 million people being killed inside of the barbed wire fences. It was separated into three main camps: Auschwitz I, the main labour camp; Auschwitz II, Birkenau, the extermination complex; and Auschwitz III, Monowitz, the labour camp for IG Farben. The stories told by the victims of the guards who worked there were incredibly harrowing and still are to this day, and the barbarism exhibited by some guards is still incredibly shocking. After the Second World War, a trial was held that aimed to bring 40 former staff of Auschwitz to justice. The best known defendants were the former commandant, Arthur Lieber Henschel, and Maria Mandl. However, there are so many members of staff who managed to escape and evade the hangman's noose. Join us today as we look at the justified executions of the female guards of Auschwitz, and remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. The Auschwitz trial began on the 24th of November 1947, and there were 40 former members of staff who faced a court in Krakow. There were an alarming lack of staff who were women. Only 5 of the 40 defendants were female. However, the stories told by female prisoners of Auschwitz talks about the sadistic barbaric treatment that went on inside of the barbed wire fences. Other former members of staff such as Irma Grese, Johanna Bormann and Elizabeth Falkenrath did work at Auschwitz, but they were brought to trial earlier at the Belsen Trials after they were captured at the different camp. Many of the female guards of Auschwitz were transferred to different places throughout the Second World War, and many accompanied death marches as prisoners were transported further away from the front lines. With this, many female members of staff ran away and hid out in different towns and villages, leaving the death march to try and evade capture. The women's camp at Auschwitz was established following a mass transport of Jewish German women from Ravensbrück in March 1942. 999 women were transferred first, and eventually around 30% of the registered inmates of Auschwitz were female. The first women who arrived were classed as asocial and political and criminal, and they were given serial numbers. As time went on, the women's camp expanded on a huge scale. A new women's camp was created inside of Auschwitz too, and initially women were held in blocks 1 of 10 of Auschwitz I, but the new women's camp held thousands. 13,000 were transferred there, and it had 15 brick barracks and 15 wooden barracks. Further expansion took place, and the following year it held over 32,000 women. Along with women, guards were also transferred to Auschwitz. They were mostly trained at Ravensbrück, a concentration camp exclusively for women, and the guards were taught by horrifically brutal women, whose job it was to make these specific guards depraved killers who had very little regard for human life. The conditions in the women's camp were terrible. In fact, there was one point when the male prisoners entered to establish a hospital there, and at one point there were so many corpses around they could not distinguish between them and the women who were still alive. The sanitation was terrible, and they were treated awfully. One former inmate wrote, "There was only one latrine for 30 to 32,000 women, and we were permitted to use it at only certain hours of the day. We stood in line to get into this tiny building, knee-deep in human excrement. As we all suffered from dysentery, we could barely wait our turn, and soiled our ragged clothes, which never came off our bodies. The latrine consisted of a deep ditch with planks thrown across it at certain intervals. We were so close we could not help soiling one another. As you can expect, disease spread very quickly too. Sterilisation experiments also took place which affected the women, with them being carried out in Barrack 30. The first female camp Lagerfeuer in was Johanna Langerfeld, and she was later succeeded by Maria Mandl, who in particular was known for her brutality. When Auschwitz was liberated by the Red Army, they found 7,000 prisoners alive in the main camps, as well as hundreds of corpses. They came across the true horrors of Auschwitz and the fear that the prisoners had. After the war, only 789 individuals who worked at Auschwitz and its subcamps were ever tried, and 750 received some form of sentence, be it a death sentence or time in prison. As the years went on, trials were still being held, and some are still today held, with the sentences becoming more lenient and focused on time in prison. In fact, even fewer women were ever brought to trial. At the Auschwitz trial that took place in Krakow in 1947, Maria Mandl, Therese Brandl, Hildegard Lachert, Alice Orlowski and Luise Danz were brought to trial. The most high-profile female defendant was Maria Mandl, and she was accused of being complicit and involved in the mass murder of 500,000 prisoners. During the trial, there were many statements provided by prisoners who told of Mandl's brutality. For example, it was said, "At the ramp in Auschwitz, the transport was awaited by Mandl, accompanied by SS woman Margot Dreschel, and as soon as the transport arrived, Mandl carried out a selection, sending approximately 90% of the transport to the cars, which transported these people to the crematorium. During these selections, Mandl tortured the prisoners, beating the women and the men and the children with a whip and kicking them blindly. She would tear the children from the arms of their mothers, and Mandl would then beat the mothers. One young mother tried to get near her 2-year-old child who was thrown onto the car, and Mandl kicked her and beat her so badly that she didn't get up anymore. The same woman also stated, "Mandl began to beat me so cruelly that I fell. She continued to kick me, and she knocked out almost all of my teeth." Maria Mandl became known as a beast for her abuse of the prisoners, whipping and kicking them, sometimes to death. She often stood at the gates of the women's camp, and if any prisoner looked at her, she would kill them immediately, sending them straight to the gas chambers. Mandl also signed the inmates list, sending its estimated 500,000 women and children to their deaths in the gas chambers. Therese Brandl was a guard who worked inside of Auschwitz too, and she was also known for taking part in selections in which women and men would be sent to their deaths. She was also known for physically assaulting prisoners and even children. She was even accused of forcing children to stand out in the frost overnight, in freezing conditions that would kill. Another woman brought to trial was Luise Danz. She rose throughout the ranks inside of Auschwitz, but later was transferred back to Ravensbrück before Auschwitz was liberated. She was known for beating prisoners brutally with her bullwhip, forcing women to stand for hours on end in exhausting roll calls in terrible conditions. Danz was even involved in hanging prisoners inside of Auschwitz too. Hildegard Lachert was brought to trial, and she was known for sadistic behaviour. She became known as Bloody Brigitte for her cruel treatment. She took place in many selections too, and also set her dog onto the prisoners. She would encourage these to rip the prisoners to pieces and strike fear into the inmates. Alice Orlowski was also known for her terrible behaviour. At other camps, she whipped prisoners and was involved in taking items and jewellery from them. However, it was said, as she was posted on a death march to Auschwitz, her attitude changed during the march, and she allegedly displayed some kindness to some women. It's believed that she knew she would be tried as a war criminal, hence why she displayed some empathy. At the Auschwitz trial, every defendant who faced a judge was found guilty of crimes against humanity, and 23 death sentences were issued. However, only 2 of the women, Maria Mandl and Therese Brandl, were condemned to die and were executed by hanging. The other women were given various sentences in prison and were made to spend time behind bars. Of the executions of Mandl and Brandl, these took place on the 28th of January 1948 inside of Krakow prison. The prison had been one of the most notorious Nazi prisons in Poland, and along with other condemned, they were hanged. Maria Mandl herself was the first of the group to be executed, and at 7:09 a.m. the hangings began inside of the execution chamber. Maria, along with 4 other male prisoners, was forced to climb a simple step. Then the noose was secured around her neck, and shortly after a check was done, the stool or step was removed, and Mandl was left, slowly strangling to death. It was said that it took 15 minutes for all of the first group, including Maria Mandl, to be classified as dead by the doctor, with their executions not being instant. Therese Brandl's execution happened shortly after too, but these 2 were the only women executed following the Auschwitz trials. There were a number of other female guards who worked at Auschwitz, such as Irma Grese and others mentioned earlier, but these specifically weren't executed following a trial solely centred around the crimes inside of Auschwitz. The Belsen trials in which these were executed within took into account the crimes of women who were captured at Belsen, but also focused on those crimes they committed inside of Auschwitz. So despite thousands of guards working inside of Auschwitz, only a small percentage were sentenced to death. The Auschwitz trials sought to bring some punishment for the crimes committed inside the horrific death camp, but many of the former staff remained unpunished. Once again, thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.